And welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is just a bit of a trigger warning for those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones. I really am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving.
No.
In addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection. This week, Bill McKeever joins us as we wonder, where are the Book of Mormon lands? My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcaster, and our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast, and here is Ronnie Baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw its shadow, and now there are 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is the Designer Jesus Collection. No more need your Jesus be a source of social embarrassment. Check out all the great new Designer Jesus fashions at a church runway near you. Our regular legal disclaimer, our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that would be Bill McKeever, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter referred to as the webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. This satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. Notice, the opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy it, or if it really annoys you and you want to inflict it on someone else to ensure your continued access, please go to MidwestOutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And as you do, never fear, this webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. And now our very special guest, Bill McKeever. Take a bow, Bill. Always glad to see you. As always.
Always good to be with you guys.
Well, that's something very few people say. But
yeah. Yeah, well, we don't know what they say behind our back, but so there's a couple of things I want to do sort of as a little bit of an intro here. One is to, if I can remember how to do this. Oh yeah. Now I forgot what I want to do. Oh yeah, I know exactly what I want to do. I just don't always remember how to.
That dementia thing coming back again.
Well, yeah, they're moving things around on me here, and so I get a little.
For somebody with
I sometimes get a little confused, but I want to display this. It's kind of important to something that Bill McKeever has been working on and doing, and is now in place. It's the Utah Christian Research Center. Bill, where is this?
Looks like
it's actually located in Draper, which is in the southern portion of the Salt Lake Valley. And it's something that Eric Johnson, who's worked with me since the 1980s, it's something that we really felt led to do when Sandra Tanner retired. And she sold her bookstore. Eric and I used to volunteer for Sandra down there on Saturdays to give her a little bit of a break. And when we heard that she was going to retire, we kind of wondered what she was going to do with the bookstore. Well, she ended up selling it, and which was fine with us. It's great. She had a long run down there.
You did.
And we had a lot of people asking us if we might continue something like what she was doing. And Eric and I had been discussing this because we knew for a while that she was going to eventually retire. And based on some of the things that people had told us, we thought, well, what could we do? Well, Sandra dealt mainly with books that dealt with the subject of Mormonism. And it was a great place for people to come in who were struggling with their Mormonism, or they were Christians wanting to talk with their LDS friends or relatives. And so they could just sit down in a safe environment. For instance, if they were LDS, for instance, we aren't going to tell their bishops that they're there. We're not going to talk to anybody about the questions they might have been having. And so a lot of Latter-day Saints felt it was safe as well. And we would just have great discussions with people. And there were actually several cases of Mormons who would come in, talk to us, and who eventually became Christians as a result of those conversations. So God was really blessing in that area. Well, bookstores are not really, in vogue nowadays.
Right.
Amazon pretty much killed all of those. And don't get me wrong, I think Amazon, what a great idea. I wish I had stock at the beginning, but that's another story. But we wanted to do something a little bit more than just have books, and knowing that books certainly don't keep the doors open. And so we had this idea of not only having books that deal with Mormonism, as Sandra did, but we also have books on a number of apologetic themes that affect, I think, Christians in a lot of areas in our culture. So we have books dealing with how our Bible came to be and things like that, and responding to critics, responding to atheists, and a bunch of topics like that. But we also wanted to have a kind of a museum setting when you walk in. So if you were to walk in and you look to the right, for instance, you'll see a big display case that has a lot of Eric's, his archaeological junk, because that's what archaeological evidence is, someone else's junk. But we've got pottery going back to the early Bronze period. We've got a lot of interesting things. And what we're trying to do, if we were to have a Latter-day Saint, let's say, walk in, or even a Christian walking in, just wanting to have more information on how to share their faith. The theme of the front part of our building is that the Bible is a book of real people, real places, and real events. Now, that's not an original saying by any stretch of the imagination, but it kind of sets the tone for what we're trying to do at the Utah Christian Research Center. And what we're trying to emphasize here, especially if they're Latter-day Saints, is that even though most Latter-day Saints would tell you they believe the Book of Mormon is a book of real people, real places, and real events, there's no real tangible evidence to support that.
Right.
I mean, it's not that Mormon apologists don't have some of their pet trophies, you might say, like the Nahum stone and things like that. But that's old world. There's nothing in the New World that verifies a lot of the places that are named specifically in the Book of Mormon pages. So we wanted to show through a number of ways the superiority of the Bible when it comes to that expression, being a book of real people, real places, and real events. So archaeology is one of the ways that we do that. Then we also have a number of displays of handwritten Hebrew Torah fragments showing the precision that the scribes would put into copying their scripture, and talk about the fact that, for instance, in 1 Nephi 13 in the Book of Mormon, where it talks about many plain and precious things were taken out of the Bible, out of the scriptures,
Right.
basically showing that that's just not true. But yet a lot of Latter-day Saints believe that. So we talk about transmission of the text. We talk about Article 8 in the Articles of Faith that Mormons do believe is true, that the Bible is only true as far as it's translated correctly. And of course, we all know that Joseph Smith uses the wrong word there. He uses the word translated when really I think he's talking about transmitted. And Mormon scholars have pretty much verified that that's really what Joseph Smith was trying to get across. Well, we show that when you look at the ancient manuscripts, the manuscripts that we have available to us today, the Greek manuscripts from the New Testament, Hebrew from the Old, that these plain and precious things that Mormons often talk about, and which Joseph Smith inserts into First Nephi 13, really isn't an argument. It's not a deal breaker. I mean, yeah, we know about variants or differences in the handwritten manuscripts. That's not a problem. Now, if you're ignorant of how our Bible was passed down to us when it was being handwritten before the printing press around 1440, that could be a real problem for you. But if you look into it carefully and get away from the nonsense of Bart Ehrman and those guys, you find that that's really not a deal breaker at all, that we have a very good understanding of what the Bible said originally based on the manuscripts that are still available to us today. And so we take people around our center and we talk about this. We have replicas of, Greek papyri and stuff. And we also have a replica of the Great Isaiah Scroll, a portion of it that was found in Cave 1, and talk about the fact that the Isaiah Scroll in and of itself, that's 125 BC is that what this replica represents. 125 BC. Before that, the King James, for instance, used the Masoretic text for its Old Testament. That's around 1000 AD. But yet, when you compare what is in the Great Isaiah Scroll found in Cave 1 with what we have in Isaiah today, there's really no real significant differences between the two. I think someone put it at about 95%, some even higher. But if that's true, and you're talking about an 1100-year gap, and First Nephi 13 is telling us the truth, wouldn't you think that there would be a huge difference? But there's not. And the same is true for the Greek manuscripts that we have for the New Testament. We don't see that huge disparity. And the glitches that we do see, we know they're glitches. We can tell. The scholars can. I'm certainly not a scholar by any stretch.
Well, and you can even tell approximately when those glitches entered in to the text as you compare other texts.
Yeah, and so we're trying to encourage, let's say, someone who's just left the LDS Church and they're not quite sure, because if you've ever talked with a lot of former Latter-day Saints, they go through this period in their life after they leave of this huge amount of doubt. Did I make the right decision? Because it's not unusual that should anything at all go wrong in the life of a former Latter-day Saint, it's not unusual for their old friends or family members to go, see, you should have never left the only true church on the face of the earth. And so we're trying to encourage them to say, look, you made the right decision. There is nothing you need to worry about here. You made the right choice. Well, the front part of our center deals with the reliability of the Bible. And then the other part of our building deals with the history of Mormonism, going up to the time of Brigham Young. So we start with the first vision, for instance. Did Joseph Smith really see the Father and the Son as Latter-day Saints say that he did? Did he get his facts right? He says that this revival took place in the spring of 1820 in the area where he lived near Palmyra, New York. Well, the revival he describes didn't happen in the spring of 1820. It happened in the fall of 1824 into 1825. And that can be demonstrated by historical evidence. The revival Smith describes did not happen in the spring of 1820, couldn't have happened in the spring of 1820 because he says great multitudes were added to the churches in 1820. And yet when we look at the three churches he specifically names, the Baptist, Methodist, and Presbyterian churches that were in the area of Palmyra where Smith was living at the time, those churches didn't have great multitudes added to them. The Baptist church had, I think, 5 added to it. The Methodist lost 5. You probably could say the Baptist maybe took those Methodists. I don't know.
They traded them, yeah.
Yeah. And then you have the Presbyterians. They were static. They didn't lose or gain any in 1820. So the revival he's describing certainly didn't happen in the spring of 1820. And some might mention, well, is that really a big deal? Well, yeah, it is. Because if the revival Smith is describing took place in the fall of 1824, that would mean Moroni is the first vision in 1823. And they're not about to change that date to the right date. And here's a point that I like to bring up to Latter-day Saints when I'm talking to them. They claim that their church is the only true church on the face of the earth, but yet whenever they tell the story about how their church began, they begin it with a lie.
Right.
They'll always start off, well, in the spring of 1820. That is a lie. And I don't know of any nicer way to say it, but the church has been deceiving its people and the general public on this really ever since the beginning. Or you could say ever since Joseph Smith wrote down that testimony, which is found in their scriptures today. It's under Joseph Smith History in the Pearl of Great Price.
Do you think it'd be better if they just said, you know, here is the story of the Book of Mormon, it's based on a true story, something like that, you know?
They could. Well, they do believe it's a true story.
Based on real events.
Yeah, really. How much is true? Well, there was a Palmyra and there was a Joseph Smith. After that, it kind of gets a little fuzzy.
Gets a little murky.
Yeah.
You know, this question about evidence is a really important one, because it's pivotal to saying, how do I know everything else you're saying is true? So some years ago, I think you and I talked about this a little bit in the past. We had two Mormon missionaries who Joy often referred to as the boys, which irritated the big guy that we ended up meeting. And I would keep asking them questions about evidence. Do you have evidence? I mean, I said, I've been to Israel. I've seen the places. I've touched the coins. I know what it looks like. Do you have anything like that? And they said, well, we don't really know, but we'll find out, they said. I said, okay, great.
Right.
So about 2 days later, they called me, and I lived in Lombard, Illinois at the time, which doesn't mean anything to anybody except Ron and I.
Yeah.
But 2 towns over is a town called Naperville, and they said, we have great news. One of our archaeologists lives in Naperville, a guy named David Palmer, and he has a book that'll be really helpful, and he's willing to meet with you. And I said, that would be great. And so Joy and I made plans to go and meet with David Palmer and the 2 lads. And when Joy would refer to them, David Palmer say, they're elders. And she'd go, I know the boys, you know, I know that they're elders, but they're still the boys to me.
Yeah.
So he then takes us through this slideshow that he uses when he speaks in Mormon churches, that talks about where he's doing archaeology, which oddly enough is not in the United States, it's in Central America. And so, yeah, as he's going through, he goes, now this might be about the time of the Book of Mormon. This could correspond to the Book of Mormon. This may be similar to something in the Book of Mormon. And then he takes the map, because I have a question about location here, and he turns the map of Central America, Mexico. Yeah, he turns it, because you have a problem. The Book of Mormon talk about they're spreading out from the seas north to the seas east, seas south, seas north.
Right.
And that strip of land doesn't fit that. So he turns it. He goes, now this is true north and this is Mormon north, which I thought was kind of inventive. And when he got all through, I tried to wait for one question. Joy kept interrupting. I tried. And at the end, he goes, if I didn't have any evidence, which he didn't, I still have my testimony that Joseph Smith is a true prophet and the Book of Mormon is true. And I said, okay, I just have one question. Have you found any actual evidence? I mean, a Solomonic temple would be really cool, but I don't know. Do you have a toy, a wheel, something, a coin from that period? And he said, no, we haven't discovered anything. The 2 Mormon missionaries took a double take on that. They were shocked. Yeah. And oddly enough, Bill, The next day, they were relocated to someplace else in the country.
Oddly, it's funny how that happens. And there's a guy smoking a cigarette off on the side,
Yeah.
Don't ask questions, Agent Mulder.
The sad part is a lot of Latter-day Saints are led to believe there is evidence there, but they've never been challenged to come forth with the evidence. I often tell people when they talk to me here in Salt Lake Valley, it's easy for me to say this because we're just a few miles away from the History Museum down across from Temple Square. And I'll tell people, go into the History Museum and ask one of the nice people there. Usually they have retired people that are there. They're not missionaries. What would you call them? Like a docent or something like that? I guess that's a name they give. And just ask one of the nice people there if they could show you their Nephite artifacts. I've done this, and I've sent people down to do that too. And it's amazing because I remember the first time I did this, I was with Eric. This was years ago before we even lived in Utah. We were still living in San Diego County at the time. And I remember this nice lady standing there. We went in and it says, we're from out of town and we've come to see your Nephite artifacts. Could you show us where you keep them? And I don't know if I told you this story before, Dawn, but she didn't know of where they were, if they had them, or that we should have those. Why don't we? But there was a man that was standing next to us, about maybe 6-7 feet away, talking to someone. And she went and talked to him, and he came over, and we repeated our question. And he said to us, he says, there are no Nephite artifacts. The church doesn't even know where to look. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was talking to the museum curator. And so you figure if anybody would know that answer, he would have known. And I appreciated his candor because he's absolutely correct. There are no Nephite artifacts in their history museum. And you would think if any existed, they would be displayed prominently, if for nothing else, to kind of shut down people like us who have been challenging Latter-day Saints on this subject for many, many years. When you compare it to the Bible, I mean, Don, you go to the Israel Museum. I mean, you could spend days in there of all the things that they found. And it's just fascinating to go into a place like the Israel Museum and see some of these artifacts that demonstrate people that are, for instance, in the Bible. Okay. And that's one of the things that we try to do at the center too. We have a display of archaeological artifacts that have been discovered that verify stories in the Book of Mormon.
In the Bible.
Forget that one. In the Bible. Okay. Boy, I could see that being taken out of context. But like the Taylor Prism, for instance, the original is in the British Museum. And there's another one that's in the Israel Museum, and I think there's one in Chicago as well. But these basically chronicle Sennacherib's military campaign going through Israel. And it talks about King Hezekiah on this prism. Well, Hezekiah obviously is a real person mentioned in the Bible. Right. And there's a lot of these kind of archaeological artifacts that have been discovered over the years that verify these stories in the Bible. The Book of Mormon has nothing like this, nothing at all. And we try to explain to people that even though we have archaeological finds to support some of the names and battles and places and events that are in the Bible, it doesn't necessarily prove the Bible, but it's a piece of the puzzle that does eventually cause you to come to the conclusion,
right?
Well, that the Bible has reliability.
Yeah, if these are supposed to be historical records, you would at least expect historical evidence of the places, the names,
yes,
especially the places. Okay, people their lifespans are a lot shorter than the lifespans of places, which can be millennia. That can last. Damascus is probably the world's oldest continuously existing city on the face of the earth, and so it's no surprise that we find evidence of Damascus on records. On historical records all over the Middle East. Plus, we have the actual city right there. It's still here. So, anyways, where are these cities? And where were they supposed to be? When they show you a map, they go right to Central America.
Well, it's interesting. I want to read something to you. I've got it called up here. Let me see if I can find it very quickly. It was a publication that came out in 1890, and it was called the Juvenile Instructor. It was a periodical that the LDS Church put out, and this is a statement by George Q. Cannon. He was a member of the first presidency under Brigham Young. And in this 1890 edition of the Juvenile Instructor, this is the January 1st, 1890 edition, this is what he says. Brethren who lecture on the lands of the Nephites or the geography of the Book of Mormon are not united in their conclusions. No two of them, so far as we have learned, are agreed on all points. And in many cases, the variations amount to tens of thousands of miles. These variations of views lead to discussion, contention, and perplexity. And we believe more confusion is caused by these divergencies than good is done by the truths elicited. For these reasons, we have strong objections to the introduction of maps and their circulation among our people, which profess to give the location of the Nephite cities and settlements. He argued that they have a tendency to mislead rather than enlighten, and they will lead to division of sentiment and be very unprofitable. We see no necessity for maps of this character because, at least, much would be left to the imagination of those who prepare them. And we hope that there will be no attempt made to introduce them or give them general circulation. That's 1890. I can give you a statement that's on their website right now that says virtually the same thing. So since 1890, when that was published, to today, the church has nothing to verify. Now, here's the point I like to bring out to Latter-day Saints. If you have no geography, you can't have archaeology.
Right.
Right. That's exactly right. I mean, if you find you have a map, you take your shovel and you go dig, and we would know, if we know where the Nephite settlements were, then we could do the archaeology. And I would say if you don't have geography, you really don't know whether you have history or not. In fact,
that's a good point. And that's what I think is unfortunate for members of the LDS Church. We have a multitude of evidence that verifies things that are mentioned in the Bible. Now, does it prove the spiritual message of the Bible? No, absolutely not. We know that has to be spiritually discerned. That's a work of the Holy Spirit. Evidence isn't going to really fall into, that's not going to fall into the category of empirical evidence that we're discussing. But the LDS people have virtually nothing. And when I read some of these apologist proofs for the Book of Mormon, most of them, for instance, as I mentioned, are not even in the New World. They're in the Old World.
Right.
And even they are controversial among themselves. I mean, the church doesn't even take a position of where the Book of Mormon lands are, but that doesn't stop its members from doing that. So you're going to see there's this tension within the LDS Church as to where could the Book of Mormon lands be. Now, in doing this, they're actually violating the admonition of the 1890 position that I just read out of the Juvenile Instructor. They're told, don't do this. It only causes contention. And so what do members do? They do it. Okay. And the LDS Church is guilty of it as well. They have maps in some of their manuals trying to pinpoint some of these places, even though they will often caution the reader not to take the maps seriously, and certainly don't try to say that these places are really existing where this map alleges. Well, first of all, the map they usually give you doesn't really represent anything that we know on the globe. It's just a drawing, and then they throw out and scatter these names of places that are mentioned in the Book of Mormon as if they somehow really existed. So even though the church has warned them not to do that, the LDS people do it. And I guess you could say George Buchanan's comment, if, well, maybe he did have a prophecy actually come to pass.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what's happened.
So one of the things that we note is that, like so many religions, they want to have a Jesus that really fits their narrative. And so we have a sponsor that kind of talks to this issue.
Yeah, and
I believe
they did. They really have changed the user interface here, haven't they?
Yeah.
I'm having difficulty finding just about everything right now, but yeah, we do. We have a sponsor that is really concerned about the kind of Jesus your church has, and they ask some questions. Do you cringe when the Christians you hang out with try to introduce Jesus to your non-Christian friends? Well, you can say goodbye to the days when your church's Jesus was a source of social embarrassment. Now, even your church can keep pace with the latest fashion forward trends in spirituality. Introducing the Designer Jesus Collection. These amazing new Jesus styles are hitting church runways in the most exclusive Jesus fashion shows at churches near you. These amazing, you don't want to miss Yoga Jesus, Hipster Jesus, Buddy Jesus, Socialist Jesus, Mormon Jesus, Muslim Jesus. At the Designer Jesus Collection fashion shows, you'll find a Jesus you'll be proud to introduce to your most sophisticated, cutting-edge friends and acquaintances. Please observe the attendance requirements, cost of admission, your eternal soul, required attire, semi-formal. All proceeds benefit His Royal Majesty of the Kingdom of Darkness. The Designer Jesus Collection, London, Paris, Rome, New York, Salt Lake City, and coming to a church runway near you. So, anyways, yeah, they took off all the labels for everything. So now I have these icons that I go, wait a minute, I'm used to looking for a label. And okay, thank you. So anyways, now yeah, we're talking about geography and the lack thereof. And I had a question, and then Don interrupted it by telling me to do a commercial. So where were we?
So while you think of your question again, I need to digress just momentarily because we have a conference coming up in August where Bill Hunsberger will be there, but Bill McKeever will be there as well. It's August 15 and 16. And I have a little video promo that I can put up there, but it might take me a moment or two to get to.
I can't do any filler for you, Don. Sorry.
I'm sorry. What you say? What?
I can't do any filler for you while you look for it. But maybe Bill has something you can talk about.
Well, I don't really need filler because I can just say there's going to be a lot of cool people there. But here is the promo, right?
Okay.
Right.
Just right.
Right. I lost. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. That's why.
Speaker. Is this a user interface issue too? Okay.
And there you have it. That's August August 15 and 16. You can go to the EM&R website, check out the information, pre-registration. Doesn't cost anything. We're going to do a free will offering. And
what time again?
Pardon? Palatine, Illinois.
All right.
So now, do you recall your question?
No. So well, I had something to do with whatever you guys were talking about at the time. So
mention something, Don, because you showed Corey and Rob there, Corey Miller and Rob Bowman.
Yep.
We just recently had Corey speak at our center, and we offer free classes too. Part of the building that we have is a classroom setting, and we can sit pretty comfortably in there, about 30, 40 people. In fact, when Sandra ever speaks there, we have to set up every chair we have. But we've just had Corey out there, and also we interviewed Rob Bowman on his book on Jesus. And so I'll tell you, if people have never heard Corey or Rob, I would strongly encourage them, come out, just to hear them, and then stick around and catch us on the B team. Okay. Because they are good. Corey has a very pertinent message for our culture today. And Rob, he's amazing.
Well, Anaz as well. She was a child bride in Iran.
I'm not familiar with her. This will be good. I want to hear that.
Yeah, she's very, very sharp woman. She's Christian, and she managed to escape from Iran. And she's here. She's just doing a great job, really sharp. So we're excited to have her. And she's talking about Sharia and how it's really making breakthroughs here in the U.S.
I guess, when I think about what you guys were saying, I go back, I don't know, is it 20 years now that the New Mormon Challenge book came out? What year was that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, it's probably been at least that.
2002. Yeah, 23 years. We just had its 23rd birthday. I have no idea what's happened to Carl Mosser and Paul Owen. I think Paul Owen is still in someplace in North Carolina. I have no idea where Carl Mosser is. But here were mainly two guys who were saying, "Oh, the Christian church is losing the battle,"
and not knowing it,
and we don't even realize it. It's like I see dead people and they don't even know they're dead. I see, I see losers and they don't even know they're losers. And it's like I never really saw how they thought they could make that point. Do you recall that debate, Bill?
I do, and naturally, I think it was a bit unfair as to what it was trying to say. It was trying to argue that the Christians should be taking on the scholars more, and I think that misses the point of at least why we exist as a ministry. I mean, as I mentioned, I'm not a scholar. I'm not trying to reach, the people at Brigham Young University that are teaching these classes. I'm trying to reach the average member who doesn't know a lot of this stuff about either Christianity or even their own church. So to assume somehow that ministries like mine and others that were mainly on a street level trying to talk to the average member was losing the battle, I thought was just unfair. I mean, I'm not even trying to reach those people. Now, if Carl Mosher and those guys have the academic way of reaching these people, then by all means, get in there and go after it. I'll root you on and do that. But that's not what I was called to do. It's not that we ignore what some of the scholars are having to say, because we certainly do. We do tackle some of the arguments that they raise.
Sure.
But that's not our primary mission here. And I would say we've been very successful. I mean, pretty soon here is going to be our 50th anniversary that we've been doing this. We've been doing this since 1979. And we have seen a lot of people come out of the LDS Church and find faith in the Jesus of the New Testament. And we get comments from people all the time how grateful they are for what we've been doing and plodding along in this mission field. And certainly there's not a lot of fanfare in this. Most people really don't even know who we are.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, people find out about us, they go to our website. Oh, how long have you been around? Well, just about since the beginning, when people could have websites, we were there. I mean, we have a 3-letter URL. Not too many of those around anymore, but we've been on the web for years. But people find us and they're so thankful that we're there. And where have you been? Well, we haven't moved.
Yeah, we have kind of the same thing. I'll never forget. I got a call from Moody Bible Institute at one point with some questions on an issue, and they said, "You guys are like the most best kept secret we've ever seen."
Yes.
In ministry.
Yeah.
So and on the street thing, Dr. Norm Geisler, the late Dr. Norm Geisler, and I, as you know, we're great friends. We often talked about the role of what I call, which is what I am, the street fighters.
Right.
Right. We need the academics, but we need the street
Yeah.
fighters because that's where we're meeting the people. Most are not going to the academics because they don't feel like they can even understand what they're saying a lot of times.
But you know what? If I might express one of my irritations about this whole thing is we don't badmouth the scholars as a rule. You know, like you said, we both work in this mission field doing
Right.
what we're called to do. But why is it sometimes these scholars have to take shots at us? I mean, just I don't get it.
You're talking about the guys who you're not talking about Mormon scholars.
No,
here,
no. I'm talking about Christian scholars.
Yeah.
Like, you know, well, and guys like Richard Mao, you know, former president of Fuller. I mean, that guy was an irritant to me because he would say some of the dumbest things, and it's like, have you ever even read their publications?
Yeah, it's really kind of like I don't know if Mosser or Owen would have endorsed the book How Wide the Divide. That was Blomberg, wasn't it?
That
was Blomberg, right?
Yeah. Now, I mean, this was pathetic. I mean, we're just going to limit. Do I understand this correctly? They limited the grounds of the debate to only the Book of Mormon.
Right.
Okay. We're going to leave out, Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, everything Brigham Young ever said. Everything Joseph Smith ever said outside those books, we're going to leave all that out. Okay, how do you? It's kind of like we're going to only talk about the Quran and not the Hadiths,
Yeah, right.
Because it's like, I mean, people are not used to the idea, I guess, that Christianity may be the only. I mean, we're talking about. I'm going to specifically say evangelical Protestant Christianity may be the only faith on earth that only has one text. I mean, one group of books, the Bible, and nothing outside of that.
Yeah.
The Roman Catholic Church has that plus the magisterium. Okay. Jehovah's Witnesses has the Bible plus everything the Watchtower ever said in the last 6 months because it might have changed something,
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, so you have to take into consideration all those things because they are part of the essentials of their faith. So that was just a total, I don't know what to call it, a total fumble on the part of Dr. Blomberg, who's excellent in other areas. This is just not his area. He should not have ventured into it.
Well, I think you make a good point. And Dr. Blomberg's great at what he does. And I just encourage him to do what he does best, stay in your lane. But it's like, somehow they feel like they can pontificate in what I've been doing for years. And I mean, I do this every day, and I would be more than happy to collaborate with people like this, but it's like they don't even want it because I guess maybe the circles they hang in, the Mormon scholars, kind of just poo-poo us like, we're not making any dent at all. And maybe they ought to talk to a lot of the ex-Mormons that we see.
Yeah. Well, it's typical though for scholars to think that they're more important than they are. Now, I have a master's degree, and I greatly esteemed all of the scholars who helped me along in getting my master's in biblical studies. My advisor, Walter Elwell, passed away. I believe it was earlier this year. I think it might have been last year. I forget now. But I was kind of sad to lose him. I didn't agree with him on everything.
Right.
I didn't agree with Dr. J. Julius Scott, my New Testament prof, on everything, but I greatly valued everything he taught me. So scholars are not infallible, and when you hang around with them, they usually don't think they are.
Right.
The better ones usually don't go around acting like, well, I have special insight that you guys don't have. All that they can really say is, I've read more texts than you probably. I've interacted with more information than you have, but you know what? That doesn't guarantee you're drawing the correct conclusion. And they'll be the first to admit it.
Yeah.
I think a couple of things before and I don't want to go too far afield on academics.
Right.
But I see a couple of things. Younger doctorates, let's say, younger academics, tend to be
Mhm.
more in the area of I have it together because I did the work. Not
I
all,
did the
but
reading.
yeah, I did the reading. But they don't really have the experience outside of the reading. Now, again, that's not all of them. That's some, and they tend to be younger. Then there's another kind of an academic that tends to get themselves in trouble because they have too much time to think big ideas. And in the process of thinking big ideas, they come up with odd things that you go, well, where do you even get that biblically? Like Roy Harris's idea that Jesus was raised bodily but not physically. Well, how does that work? And it creates this big controversy. I think they had too much time on their hands. Personally, I think that's what happens. And they come up with a novel idea that then becomes sort of doctrinal. I think Michael Heiser did the same thing. So having said that, I know, and I know Bill knows, and a lot of good, solid academics that are just down to earth guys who have better educational information, but we have a lot of practical experience. And so we really need to work together on
Well,
that.
and also
I agree.
your practical
I agree.
experience deals with the same body of information that the academics have to work with if they're going to answer the questions that need to be answered. And the questions, what they don't really vary between what the average Christian evangelist is trying to get across to
Right.
the average Mormon, what the average Mormon should be concerned about, and it's the same set of questions, same body of information. Okay, so now what do we add in addition to that? Well, we can examine the logic of the arguments. We could how well are we testing the arguments that are being made? So I think, Bill, you do an excellent job when you create these iron facsimiles of the golden plates.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, you raise a good point, Ron, because as you mentioned earlier, Don, we're kind of like the street fighters. In other words, we're out there putting our research to the test and listening for the rebuttals. And if there are good rebuttals, we refine our argument to respond to that. And this is something that I don't know is done very well in the scholarly realm. Not that I'm not taking away from that, but I think this is a flaw here. They don't have the ability, or maybe they don't desire, to respond to their opponent, or their counterpart is probably the better word they would rather have, whereas we will. And if I raise an argument and the guy comes back and says, well, yeah, but the whatabouts, what about this? Well, if the whatabout is worthy of hearing, I need to change my argument. That's not a very good argument.
Right.
Do they really do that? Well, we do. And I think that's why, if you were to hopefully choose between someone who's out there, like I've got two guys that work with me, Bradley Campbell and Aaron Shafawalov. Every Thursday, they are down in Provo, and they are on the street corners talking with Latter-day Saints every week. And I hear what they have to say when they come back on some of the arguments that they've heard. These guys are down there doing it. And a lot of us are out there doing it. And we hear what the Mormons are saying. I think a lot of these scholars might be shocked if they were to go out on an evening and hear what Latter-day Saints are saying about what they believe, because there is a trend going on right now that we're seeing where most Latter-day Saints, it's not at all like when I started studying this in 1975 or 4 is when I started looking into this, where their prophets and their apostles, when they said something, they meant it, and you believed what they said. Now you've got a whole generation of Latter-day Saints. They don't care what the prophet says. They don't care at all what they say.
Right.
Everything is their opinion, and their personal revelation in their mind trumps whatever the leadership is saying.
That sounds like a lot of evangelicals, actually.
Well, there probably is a parallel there, but I'll tell you, that is not the Mormonism that I studied back in the 70s.
Right.
And that is a trend that we're seeing now. And if I were to ask some of the leaders, are they aware of this? And that's an article that I have in one of our recent newsletters right now. Where where are the guardians of doctrine in the leadership of the LDS Church? Because they certainly don't seem to be doing their job. I can go on a lot of these social media, these YouTube apologists that are out there, and they're saying things that are just flat out not in accordance with Mormonism.
Right.
And yet they're giving the impression that it is, and it's not. And you can imagine how confusing that has to be for those of us on the outside trying to understand this people group and trying to dialogue with them, when it doesn't seem like there's much of a target anymore. And I mean, my ministry is Mormonism Research Ministry, not Joe Member at the local ward research ministry. I can't keep up with all that. Although
one of the things, this question comes up a lot when I get phone calls and emails. It usually starts out like this: I have a Mormon coming to my house in like 3 hours. What verse do I give them to get them out? Or I'm meeting Jehovah's Witnesses at work, and what verse do I give them? And I say, okay, that's not the right question. They say, what are you talking about? I said, well, number one, you should understand what the Watchtower teaches. That's the official line. Number two, you don't start there, you start here. How did you get involved with, and then name the group? Mm-hmm. Now, when they are telling you that, you're going to understand that what they personally believe, which may not be the same thing, that is official teaching.
It's true.
So if you start knocking down the official teaching, which they already don't either know or believe, you're just kind of wasting time. So find out what you are, how did you get there, what is your core belief system? Those questions are really, really quite helpful, because then you can start talking. I had a couple. This is so funny. A man called me, called a helpline, and said, "I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses." Now I know he is, because he says, "I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses." Only they say that.
There's
right?
a tell.
and I'm having some questions, and my wife is one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and can you get her out? Which I thought, well, that's kind of a weird way to start a conversation. And so no guarantees, but we'll meet. So we met for 4 hours. And as we met, we were talking about the deity of Christ, making the case for that with the Watchtower Bible Tract Society's Bible, which disturbed her. And then we talked about the throne, that the Father's on the throne, the Son is on the throne. And her response was, I will never forget it to this day. She said, well, I think the throne is like a really big couch with a lot of people sitting on it. Now, I thought, and I told her, I said, well, that's inventive. That's not officially what the Watchtower teaches, but it's kind of a cool response.
Yeah.
So what you're pointing out is, and it's even worse today, is many in all sorts of groups, including Christianity, are unfamiliar with the basic teachings of their own group and their own books.
Yeah. I've asked several Latter-day Saints over the years that if I were to join your church, who would I be expected to listen to? And I'll tell you, when I ask a question like that, I've never had the person tell me it's them, even though they're trying to give me the impression that what they personally believe is what the church believes. But that's not always the case. You're absolutely correct. And this can be frustrating for those of us outside trying to have a dialogue with these people.
Right.
Because we do our homework and we want to somewhat understand where they are coming from doctrinally. And then to have a Latter-day Saint flat out deny that what we've learned and studied isn't true at all. I mean, we're doing a series right now on our radio show here in Utah on Bruce McConkey's 7 Deadly Heresy speech that he gave back in June of 1980. Well, it's amazing how McConkey took doctrine so seriously, to the point to where he's going to actually rebuke, because if you listen to the beginning of his talk, he says that there's some in here that are familiar with what he's about to say, which means that there were probably BYU his teachers in that devotional, because this was held at BYU, that were doing exactly what he says they shouldn't be doing. Right. And he calls it out for what it is, a heresy. Well, you can't have much of a heresy unless you have a truth claim to combat it. McConkie had his truth claims, but I find that a lot of Latter-day Saints now, they don't really care a whole lot. They just want to argue. And man, I'm telling you, we just had that just recently. We were in Nauvoo just a few weeks ago, and we're talking to a Latter-day Saint. Immediately, this guy, we're just wanting to have a conversation. He wants to go into argue mode. I don't have time for this, but we did have a lot of very good conversations with many of the tour guides in Nauvoo and Kirtland, and even the priesthood restoration site down in what used to be Harmony, Pennsylvania. It's now Oakland, Pennsylvania. We had a lot of great conversations, and just asking questions. And this is why it's important to always ask questions, because you don't know where that individual is until you do, and you can't assume that they're orthodox, I guess you could say, in their Mormon beliefs. And so we get a lot of this, well, we don't teach that. Well, that's not really a true statement. Somebody in the church is teaching that. And if I'm citing somebody, I'm usually citing a general authority in the church. So when they say, well, we don't teach that, that's not a true statement. It may be they don't believe it,
right?
But it doesn't mean that the church isn't teaching it.
Right.
And that's why I go to that question. Well, if I were to join your church, who am I supposed to listen to? Who is an authority there that is supposed to guide me in what I'm supposed to believe? Because obviously it's not this individual. I guarantee you it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, we had a little comment earlier that sort of bears on this question, because there's a lack of clarity in general on who Jesus is. We had our Designer Jesus collection. Now, we know biblically who Jesus claimed to be. We know the Old Testament that predicted he was coming, that he is the Son of God. He is the second person of the Trinity. That we see it in John, the very first chapter, as he's dealing with the two heresies of Ebionites and Docetists. And making a case that he pre-existed creation and pre-existed the incarnation, and also created everything, and that he would incarnate physically. Those three things are all in the first 14 verses. So we have Loopy 01 who says Jesus is a messenger. Okay. Was Jesus a messenger? Sure. What was the message? Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. But was he more than a messenger, Bill?
Absolutely. He's God in the flesh. And so obviously he's more than just a messenger.
Right. He is the one, in fact, who incarnated to live a life that we could not live, to die a death that we rightfully deserve, and then was raised from the dead. Not only raised from the dead, but he raised himself from the dead, according to John chapter 2. So it would seem to me, this is how he became a believer, that someone who said he's going to raise himself from the dead and then did raise himself from the dead has my attention.
Yeah.
So, and with that, as Ron points out, we need to kind of start on the wrap up. So, again, we talked about your research center, so people can go online. And what's the website address for that?
It's UtahChristianResearchCenter.com.
Okay. Go check that out. And if you're in the area, go visit them and irritate them. And do you guys have coffee there? I don't know.
We do. We do have a coffee maker, and we do offer coffee if someone were to ask.
Okay, then I could safely come there, because
you can safely come there.
I need coffee for your protection.
Yes.
And Bill will be here in Palatine, Illinois, August 15 and 16 for the Engage 2025 conference with EMNR. And you can go online to emnr.org and look at the conference information there. And with that, Ron, would you walk us out of here?
Let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just in Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and The Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polygamous. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, Ode to Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yola Quilling. Technical assistance comes through Mercury Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Our Grievance Resolution Director is Giovanna Pisami. Our Director of Privacy Assurance is Wiretapping. And original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happened.
Never.
And with that, we're going to say adios to everyone
Hasta
out
la
there.
vista, baby.